Hi guys, it's Aoife from Davies Died Laughing, and I am here with my weekly wrap up. I got 4 books read this week. The first book I read this week was What She Found in the Woods by Josephine Angelini. This is like a YA thriller mystery book, and it's basically about this girl called Magda who goes to stay with her grandparents in this kind of like summery place. She used to spend a lot of her summers there growing up, and she's gone back there for the summer to kind of recover from what seems to have been like a very strange, messed up year from where she was going to school in New York. All we know is that something has happened. She has not had a very good time. She doesn't have any friends anymore, and she has to go back to her grandparents anyway to basically just be somewhere where people can somehow look after her. And she goes on a lot of like long hikes and stuff in the woods, and then she ends up kind of coming across this boy who appears his family kind of like live in the woods. His name is Bo, and they kind of strike up a relationship, but at the same time she is back in touch with some of the old people she used to hang around with when she was younger. So she does have this kind of group of normal kind of teenagers doing teenagery things, and then she also has this kind of secret life almost where she is hanging around with this boy in the woods. And then she kind of hears about all these different things, like these bodies are being found in the woods, these bodies of women, and generally they seem to have been quite brutally murdered, and she starts kind of wondering if Bo and his family could have something to do with this, or is there something else going on in this town. And at the same time, we know this character, she does seem to have some mental health issues. She does seem to be on medication. We don't really know if she's been reliable. She has a journal that she carries around with her that she says she doesn't write in, but then other people comment and say that she is writing in. So we really do not know what to believe with this narrator. So this is a very like kind of one of these unreliable narrator thrillers, which I do tend to like when they're done well. I think they're done like they are done well, and I think in this case it was quite done well because the journal itself almost becomes like this other character. It kind of becomes its own character in a way, because it does seem to have like there's just so much emphasis and power put into this journal, and what this character what Magda can seem to do with the journal, what she's done with this journal in the past, and it does have this power in the story, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of this foreboding presence all the time, and it's really interesting to read. This book was one of those ones that kind of straight away kind of got all my buzzwords and things that I loved when I kind of started to realise what the story is about. We have this family who seem to be like this survivalist family in the woods, and I just love anything to do with that. I find it really, really interesting and really gripping to see how people survive like that. And there's always this thing of, are they just like this crazy kind of cult people, or are they just normal people trying to live like this non-conventional life? And there is this kind of, you know, you are bordering like you're trying to figure out what is what with this story. So I did really enjoy that. As things kind of started to come together in this book, I did find it really, really gripping. I found it really hard to put down. I really had to stop myself at one point from reading because I knew I would end up being up until like 2 a.m. in the morning, and I just couldn't afford to do that because obviously I work the next day, so I couldn't afford to do that. I had to force myself to stop, and I think that is a good sign of a book when you do have to force yourself to stop reading, because otherwise I would have just read all night. So I did really enjoy this. I thought like there's parts of it that like near the end of the book that are kind of, you know, in real life things wouldn't really happen that way, or people wouldn't get away with some things that they did do, but I just thought for what it was, which was a YA thriller, it was a lot of fun. It was a really gripping read. I really enjoyed it. I loved how sucked in I got to it and how much I wanted to read it. It was all I could think about. It was all I wanted to do was read this book and finish this book and find out everything that had happened. And I will say the main character, Magda, she's not one of these most likeable of characters. She is someone that, you know, she does have this very grey history. We know she has done things that aren't particularly right. I did just really enjoy seeing what was happening to her and seeing her figuring things out, and yeah, so I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was In at the Deep End by Kate Davies, and this one was an absolute trip. Like, this was a really weird, funny book. This is it's really an adult contemporary. It is very comedic in nature. It's not one to be taken too seriously. But it is about this character called Julia. She is 26 and she just has not had very much luck with romantic relationships or even just like sexual relationships in her life. The majority of sexual relationships that she has had, or sexual encounters that she has had, have always been really extremely disappointing. She's never had, you know, this out of the world kind of sex the way she hears other people have. And she kind of just has decided that maybe just sex isn't for her. Maybe she's just not good at it. Maybe she's just not supposed to have like a romantic relationship in her life where she has this really great sex life, and she's kind of given up. And then after another disappointing encounter, she kind of starts figuring out that maybe the problem isn't with her but with the men that she's been sleeping with, and she ends up sleeping with a woman and having an amazing time, and she decides, well, I guess this obviously means that I'm a lesbian now. And she comes out to her friends and her family, and she ends up kind of just like really embracing like her new lesbian lifestyle, and like joining up kind of like an LGBT swing dance group, and like, you know, kind of getting all these new friends who are all also in the queer community and meeting new people. And she ends up getting into this relationship with a woman called Sam, and it's very intense. It's very intense from kind of the get-go, both like their sexual feelings for each other, and things do like romantically get quite intense as well. And it's really just this kind of romp about this girl who kind of really kind of comes into her own and really grows as a person, and realizes what she can do, and the kind of the joy she can take out of life, and the joy she can take out of others, in terms of, you know, these really amazing kind of relationships she can have with people, and the freedom that she kind of discovers with her own sexuality, I guess, in a way. And the thing is like, this isn't like a completely serious book. Like, this book, Kate Davies is a comedian, and there is a lot of comedy in this book. It's not one to be taken too seriously. Like, the amount of like, I've learned a lot more about like lesbian sex than I ever thought I could learn in a book, like a normal contemporary book. And there are parts of it where I was reading it and it's like so graphic. Like, this book is very crude, it's very graphic, and some people might find it very vulgar. So if you aren't able to read stuff like that, I would say to give this book a miss, because you do have to just kind of embrace the vulgarity of sexual language and sexual descriptions to read this book and get enjoyment out of it. There were parts when I was like reading this on the train on my Kindle, and I was like, I really hope people cannot see the page that I'm reading right now, or they would be wondering what the hell I'm reading, because it was just so descriptive. But I did really enjoy it. I just thought it was quite funny. It was fun. It was just this fun book. I do feel like she did have there was this really good, obviously Julie's relationship with Sam kind of gets this, there's just this weird dynamic to it, and I wouldn't say it's not necessarily abusive, but there's definitely things in it that make you uncomfortable as a reader, seeing it from the outside. And a lot of Julia's friends can see that it's not a particularly healthy relationship either. And I think that the how long it goes on for is a little bit too long for the book, for the way kind of everything kind of wraps up in the end. I feel like we should have had a little bit more healing time maybe at the end, or more time for like Julia to really, I don't know, like take proper steps maybe. And I feel like, yeah, the relationship between Sam and Julie just it dragged on for quite a long time, where I would have liked to have seen her do a little bit more things rather than just her relationship with Sam. So yeah, but I did, as I said, I did quite enjoy this, and I think I gave like a 3.5 to a 4 stars. And as I said, it is a really fun book, but if you don't like things being extremely descriptive, I would steer away from it. But if you're okay with that, then go for it. After that, I picked up Lirio by Garth Nix. This is the second book in the, is it the Sabriel series or the Abhorsen series? But this is, yes, so this is the second book, and I read Sabriel, which is the first book, about, I think maybe like 2 years ago. Could have been 3 years ago. So it's been quite a while, but it's one that I've never really, I've always kind of remembered bits from. It wasn't one that I found I had to struggle a lot to really understand the world again, and it kind of came back quite naturally for me. So this one is actually set like 14 years, almost 14 years after Sabriel, which I didn't know about, so I found that quite interesting. So this is set 14 years after Sabriel. Sabriel is like a grown woman in this, but we are following this other girl called Lirael, who lives with this other type of kind of community, kind of like seers. They can see the future, and Lirael is waiting for this moment where she becomes a full seer, in a way, where she is given a thing called the sight, and she's 14 years old when we first meet her, and everyone else around her, kids younger than her, have gotten the sight and she still doesn't have it. And she's really, really struggling with kind of her sense of identity within this community when she doesn't have what everyone else has, and she kind of feels like a stranger. She doesn't really look like everyone else either, because no one really knows who her dad is, and her dad is maybe someone from outside of the community, and so she looks different, she doesn't have the same abilities, and she's just really struggling. And then she ends up kind of coming into her own kind of power in a way, and she ends up creating this companion for herself who is a dog made out of this special magic. And then a few years later she ends up going on kind of this quest to go and help someone, and this someone does end up with her meeting the prince of the land, and they end up having to go on this quest together to kind of try and save the world. So for the most part I enjoyed this. I think the writing was good. I do like the world. The only thing is that we were getting Lirael's point of view. So we were getting Lirael's story for a long while, and then about a quarter of the way through it switched to Prince Sam's point of view, and then it switched again to Lirio, and then it got switched to Sam, and then eventually the stories came together. But the stories didn't come together until like the very, very end of the book. So for a long time it felt like I was reading two completely different stories. They just weren't meshing up together properly. So by the time their stories did come together and things kind of started to flow more, like, you know, they started to flow together more, the book was over and I was just like, oh, okay, like I have to go to the next book now to find out actually what happened. I kind of felt like I thought something was going to happen in this book, but what I thought was going to happen in this book isn't going to happen until the next book. All of this book was basically just this kind of building upon the story, and as I said, it felt like I was reading two separate books for a lot of this book because it was focusing on two different characters, there are two different storylines, and they just didn't come together as quick as I would have liked them to. So yeah, I was a little bit, in that sense, I was a little bit disappointed by this, but it does make me excited for the next book in the trilogy, which is A Person, where things should properly come together, and there should be like a good bit of action, and we should see a lot of magic and cool stuff. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. As I said, I like the characters. It just took too long for everything to come together for me. And then I decided to take part in Brits. From basically Brits, she did a 24-hour readathon, and I decided to take part in that yesterday. I did try and vlog it, and then I ended up being really crap at it. I didn't really do the 24-hour readathon, but I did pick up a book that has been one of the longest books on my TBR, and it also was in my TBR jar pick the last time I did that, so you will know this book, and that was Fangirl by Rowell, because I was like, I'm going to take this opportunity to finally pick up this book and finally read it, and I did, and I finished it this morning, and I quite enjoyed this. For one that I've been very scared to pick up for quite a long time, I am pleasantly surprised by how much I did enjoy it. So this, if people don't know, this was like the BookTube book a few years ago when I first started BookTube about 4 years ago. This was the book that everyone was reading and that everyone could not stop talking about. And since then, the last like 2 years or so, I haven't seen as many people talk about it at all. So yeah, but this was the BookTube book for quite a long time. So this is about a girl called Kath who suffers from a little bit of like social anxiety, and she is starting college, and she has this twin sister, but her twin sister decided that she didn't want to room with Kath this year. She wanted to kind of have her own independence, so Kath is rooming with a stranger, which she is very uncomfortable about. And Kat, basically her big love in life is writing fan fiction, and she writes fan fiction for this kind of series of books about this magical boy called Simon Snow, and it's basically like Harry Potter. And she basically writes the equivalent of like Harry Potter, Draco Malfoy fan fiction, but with these characters called Simon and Baz. And she writes this really, really popular fan fiction story called Carry On, and she's like tens of thousands of readers following this online on the fanfiction site that she follows. So that is like her big love in life, and that is what she does. And she's kind of struggling to really kind of fit in with college, and then she ends up kind of getting into this friendship with this boy that her roommate knows called Levi, who is this guy down here, and they kind of strike up a friendship, and eventually kind of turns romantic, and we kind of see Kath kind of struggling with just living a normal college life, kind of keeping up with her fan fiction, having to write kind of her own fiction for college courses, and trying to kind of separate her abilities as a fan fiction author with her abilities as just a general her own fiction author as well. So yeah, it was just like this kind of contemporary cute book, and I did really enjoy it. When I first heard about this I heard a lot of people talking about like the representation of anxiety in this, and Kat's representation of it, because Kat does have anxiety in this. And I will say, I didn't actually find it that strong in this book, but I think it might be because I've read books that have, even like now, like I think at the time when this was published, this would have been like the representation of anxiety in this would have been huge for a lot of readers, where now we have books that have been published since this that have had even better representations of anxiety. So I've obviously read like Turtles All the Way Down, which is a very good representation of like OCD, and very strong in my opinion, and so reading something like this feels very mild compared to books with anxiety rep that I have read. So yeah, I didn't find that particularly like, you know, strong in my mind, but I think obviously at the time maybe it was. And yeah, I think it was just cute. I think Levi was very much manic pixie dream boy-ish. He was very much the type of boy everyone would have loved back this was 2011 when this was published. But I do see the appeal for this a lot. It was very fun to read. I read it quite quickly. Obviously I started it yesterday and I finished it today, so I did get through it quite quickly. And I do have Carry On the book, so I'm actually excited that I can finally read Carry On, because I wanted to read Fangirl first obviously before I read Carry On. And I think the next book in that Wayward Son is coming out this year or next year, so I can finally kind of get on that train. So yeah, that'll be fun. So I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy it. It was just this cute contemporary, and I'm glad I finally read it because it has been on my shelf unread for so long. So that is everything I've read this week. Please let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys again next time.